Hello and welcome everyone to your very own channel Drishti IAS English. In today's episode of Polity Primer, we are going to discuss a very important topic that is crucial also and that is currently in the news also. My name is Pragya and the title of our today's discussion is Voice Voting in Parliament. In this discussion, we are going to firstly study about the concept of this voice voting. Then we are also going to analyze the rules involved in the procedure of voice voting. Then we are also going to try to find an answer to a very important question, that has voice voting in India caused a decline of legislature? And lastly, we will be seeing a practice question for your prelims examination and a practice question for your mains examination. So if I talk about the background of our today's topic. So recently in the winter session of the parliament, when many of the landmark legislations was passed by the parliament, but it was passed through a procedure known as voice voting. So this procedure is being criticized by the opposition members, and the experts are also calling this procedure as a bad precedent for a democracy. So this brings us to the moot question of our today's discussion, that what is the concept of voice voting? So if I talk about this concept of voice voting and division of votes, they were both adopted by the British Parliament and were already in use by the parliaments of British India. So these concepts were introduced in the Indian Parliament by the British Parliament. And during a voice vote, the speaker asks a question to the House and asks the House to state its opinion in the form of a yes or no. And in common parlance, we call it as ayes or noes. So we use these terminologies ayes and noes for yes or no. Moving forward, based on a rough measure of which side was louder, the speaker decides if the motion was passed or it fell through. So this procedure of voice voting in parliament is completely dependent upon the intensity of the voice. Now you'll ask me, ma'am, what is the advantage? Why do we conduct voting by this procedure? Because it allows you to vote very quickly. But there are drawbacks of this procedure. This procedure is being criticized by the opposition members, by the experts in India, because it is highly inaccurate in nature, as the speaker determines the opinion of the House depending upon which side is louder. So this procedure is completely dependent upon the intensity of the voice and it is very inaccurate in nature, and that is why this procedure is being criticized. Moving forward, a literal shouting match is not the ideal way to conduct serious business unless the vote is too one-sided and formal in nature. And our constitution makers were cognizant of this fact, and due to this, parliamentary procedure requires that if a voice vote is challenged by any member, the speaker must ask for a division of votes. So what is this division of votes? What is this procedure of division of votes? That is also being followed in the British Parliament. So it used to involve physically separating MPs and then carrying out a head count, a procedure still being used in the British Parliament. So for example, if the MPs challenge the procedure of voice voting, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha or the chairman in case of the Rajya Sabha will conduct a head count. They will ask the MPs who are in favor to stand and they will head count them, and then they will ask those MPs who are against the motion to again stand on their seats, and they will head count them, and then they will find out that whether the motion has been passed in favor or has been passed against. Moving forward, in India, we do not follow such procedure. This is achieved by making MPs and MLAs. This is MLAs. To vote electronically. So we follow a system of electronic voting. So the advantage of division of votes, of course, is that the people know exactly how many votes were cast, because this is being recorded by the automatic vote recorder. Okay, and the people will also come to know that whether their MPs and MLAs who they are electing are speaking with their interest, in favor of their interest, whether they are objecting such motions which are contrary to their interest or not. This definitely ensures that MPs and MLAs are worried about the concerns of the constituencies from which they are elected on the floor of the House of the Parliament. So people also come to know that the stance which is taken by their elected MPs and MLAs. Moving forward, let us analyze the rules which are applicable in these procedures of the Parliament, in procedures of voice voting and division in the Parliament. So as per the rules 252, 253, 254 of the rules of procedure and conduct of business in Rajya Sabha, there are various methods for division in the House. So firstly, there is voice voting, which is mentioned in rule 252. Then there is counting. Then there is section 253, which talks about division by automatic vote recorder. Okay, so in India, as I have explained, that we do follow electronic voting system on the floor of the House. Then section 254 talks about division by going into the lobbies. So what is this division by going into the lobbies? As you all know, there are lobbies present in the houses of the Parliament. So the speaker will ask the persons who are supporting the motion or who are saying aye or yes to go into the right side lobby, and the persons who are saying no or opposing the motion to go into the left side of lobby. And then he will head count them and determine whether the motion has been passed in favor or has been passed against, and this is known as division by going into the lobbies. Moving forward, let us discuss rule 252 of the business of procedure and conduct of procedure in the Rajya Sabha rules, which talks about voice voting. Voice voting. Okay. So the chairman of the Rajya Sabha puts up a question at the end of the debate. Kindly note this point here. Before the House, and invites all those who are in favor of the motion to say aye and those against the motion to say nay or no. It is based on voice vote, and the chairman only would decide to look into any opposition against the bill. In case he decides to address the bill, the members who said aye or no are respectively asked to rise on their places. No names of the voters are still recorded. So what it is saying, what these statements are saying, that voice voting can be challenged in the Parliament if the MPs object to the procedure of voice voting. The division of votes come into picture. In that case, the chairman in the case of the Rajya Sabha and the speaker in the case of the Lok Sabha will ask the respective members to rise on their seats, and this all is mentioned in rule 252 of the Rajya Sabha rules, and this rule is pari materia to rule C367. Rule 367 in the Lok Sabha rules. So the procedure is same in both of the houses. Moving forward, let us discuss rule number 253. So this rule is for the division with the aid of automatic recorder. So every member is assigned a fixed seat in this case, and each seat is provided with an integrated microphone and voting console containing 4 buttons. So what are these 4 buttons? They are P for present, A for ayes, O for abstain, and N for no. So the member has the liberty to press any of these 4 buttons. There is an emergency button also, that is the red button, which is used in the emergency cases. Moving forward, let us try to find out the answer to a question which I asked you, that has the procedure of voice voting caused a decline in the legislature in India? So to an extent, the answer is yes. See, voice voting in Parliament is a very rare device that was to be used, because our constitution makers were cognizant of this fact that we should not give endless power in the hands of the legislature. There should be checks and balances in the power of the legislature, and that is why under Article 100 of our Indian Constitution, 100 of the Indian Constitution, they mentioned the passing of bills by majority. And is the voice voting procedure in the parliament following the majority? The answer is no. And that is why it is violative of Article 100 of our Indian Constitution. And if you'll see that whenever the legislation is being passed on the floor of the House, it should be subject to debates and discussions. But if you'll analyze the PRS, you will see that the debates and discussions have gone down. They're consistently going down. The bills are now being passed without any debate and discussion. In fact, the important device of question hour has also been removed after the COVID-19 pandemic. So this important device of question hour is also not available to those MPs who are expressing their dissent to the legislature. In fact, voice voting is very unconstitutional in nature because it does not talk about the majority. It does not take into account that the bills should be passed by the majority. In fact, rule number 252, which we were discussing, which entails the procedure of voice voting in the Rajya Sabha, begins with the expression on the conclusion of the debate. On the conclusion of the debate. And that is why I asked you to note those words at the end of the debate. So basically this also states that the passage of the bills in the floor of the houses of the parliament should be subjected to debates and discussions. But if you will study PRS, you will come to know that the debates and discussions are not happening. They have decreased, and that is why the experts are saying that this is bad for our Indian democracy, and voice voting does not follow the rule of majority in the house of the parliament. Worldwide voting records tangibly represent legislative procedures. They further ensure legislative transparency and accountability and offer insights into an MP's stance on crucial issues. But how are the voices of MPs being suppressed in India? Through the anti-defection law. Anti-defection. It does not mention anything about a party's own MP's dissent, because it talks about the person known as a whip, and whenever important legislation is being addressed on the floor of the House of the Parliament, it is subject to whip. That means you have to vote in the favor of your own party, and that is why anti-defection law also does not talk about your own MP's dissent, and that is how their dissent is being suppressed on the floor of the houses of the parliament. This understanding is particularly vital in a candidature-centric voting system. See, at the end of the day, who is representing us on the floor of the House of the Parliament? The MPs and MLAs, which we elect. Okay, we want them to take stand on the various issues we as a people are facing. The people in their own constituency are facing. So they want to know the stance, and this MP's dissent is being suppressed through the procedure of voice voting, because it does not take into account any debate, any discussion, or any dissent, okay, that is being there by the MPs. And who has the power to decide the division of votes in case the voice voting is challenged? The speaker in the case of the Lok Sabha and the chairman in the case of the Rajya Sabha. But they also do not allow the challenge to happen until and unless there is an emergency situation. In fact, the judiciary can also not intervene, because this procedure has been granted immunity under Article 122 and Article 212 of our Indian Constitution. That means the judiciary cannot question the business that is happening on the floor of the House until and unless it is very arbitrary in nature. Moving forward, legislative voting helps opposition parties communicate their positions to the electorate by shaping the public narrative of their stance on governmental policy. But you see what happened during the winter session of the parliament. Most of the opposition MPs were suspended, and this is a fact. Okay, so opposition dissent is also being curtailed by using this procedure of voice voting in the parliament. In the absence of voting records, their opposition is muted. Definitely, it is being muted because the suspension is also being decided by voice voting. So this is currently happening in the legislature, and we saw this happening during the winter session of the parliament, and that is why the experts are criticizing this procedure of voice vote. They are saying this procedure to be very undemocratic in nature. And their difference with the government is less tangible. That means the people are not able to come to know how many votes were casted, because we are not following an automatic recorder. We are just going on the intensity of the voice. So the people have absolutely no idea about the stance which their elected MPs and MLAs are taking on the floor of the house. As voice votes have steadily increased, a shadow of opacity has fallen over the legislative processes, which ought to be transparent in nature, and that is why this procedure is being criticized. With this, we come to a conclusion of our today's discussion. We have seen the concept of voice voting. We have also seen the rules involved in the procedure of voice voting and division of votes. We have also analyzed and tried to find an answer to the question that has voice voting ended the legislative procedure in the legislature? Has it declined the legislative procedure in the legislature? Kindly let me know your opinion in the comment box below. Now let us examine a practice question for your prelims examination. So the question is, consider the following statements. Your statement number 1 is, both the concepts of a voice vote as well as a division have been borrowed from the Parliament of the United Kingdom. Your statement number 2 is, Rule 252 of the Rules of Procedure and Conduct of Business in Rajya Sabha mentions about voice voting. Which of these statements given above is are correct? Your options are 1 only. Your option B is 2 only. Your option C is both 1 and 2, and your option D is neither 1 nor 2. Kindly drop your answers in the comment box below. Now let us examine a practice question for your mains examination. So the question is, critically analyze the procedure of voice voting in Parliament. So you will introduce the concept, as I have said, that yes, you will explain what is voice voting. You will explain that yes, the obvious advantage is that it allows quick voting, but the drawback it is very inaccurate in nature. You will write about the rules involved. You will write the you'll write the criticism of this procedure of voice voting, and you can conclude very holistically that it is a very rare legislative device and it should be used in very rare circumstances, so as the legislative procedure remains very transparent in nature, and we can also fix accountability of our elected MPs and MLAs. So you can conclude very holistically. I hope this session was insightful for you. If you have any feedback regarding this session, kindly drop it in the comment box below. If you liked today's discussion and found it to be helpful, kindly like the video and subscribe to our channel for more such updates. Thank you.